Corporate media seems deeply invested in having people believe that California is burning because people are violently protesting against injustice. Why? Why do they want us to believe something that is demonstrably untrue? Well, here's a thought. It turns out that coverage of people violently protesting is more compelling and will get them more clicks than people peacefully protesting. But here's the thing, we don't need corporate media anymore to get the facts. We have independent media, we have social media where we can see for ourselves what's actually happening. And in California, that is thousands of people showing up, organized, peaceful, but absolutely dedicated to the project of making sure that they protect their neighbors from the incursions of ICE and the illegal, unconstitutional actions of the Trump regime. So, this is basically what happened. As protests erupted across the state, right wing media outlets zeroed in on broken glass and burning trash cans, painting California as a war zone because that suited their agenda. Yes, on the one hand, part of it is that outrage and cruelty sell. Studies like the 2024 Reuters Institute Digital News Report show that legacy media increasingly relies on sensationalized framing in order to drive ratings and engagement. Peaceful protests just do not boost the bottom line. According to Media Matters, in May of 2025, disinformation has fueled pro MAGA social media since 2020 or longer. Platforms like Twitter, TS, and others provide and push mis and disinformation constantly. So that's one issue, right? Sensationalizing protests, propagandizing what's actually going on in these areas where protests are occurring. Yes, that is absolutely, without question, a motive of corporate media. There's something else, though. Donald Trump has controlled the media since he first came into office in 2017. But so too has the entire right wing. In fact, they have created an entire ecosystem starting in the 1990s. So they get to set the narrative. The troubling thing here, though, is that corporate media, not ostensibly aligned with the right wing, legacy media, not ostensibly aligned with the right wing, continue to fall for their false framing. This is wrong in and of itself, of course, because that means that media outlets aren't doing their jobs. They are not informing the American people what actually is going on. Journalists and newspapers and news outlets should not have an agenda. They should be simply reporting the facts as they are unfolding. But there's something else here that is also troubling. By focusing as they do on the isolated acts of violence, on the fringe elements, by taking up the narrative that has an agenda on the right, what gets lost? Well, quite frankly, what gets lost is the reason people are protesting in the first place. People are out on the streets in Los Angeles right now. People have been out in the streets in cities across this country and will be enforced tomorrow in over 1,800 locations. Why? Because they want to start violence? No, because there is so much at stake, and more people are beginning to realize this. It is not just about protecting immigrants and undocumented workers, although that is a huge part of it. That was the impetus for the protests in Los Angeles. But people are also starting to show up in force because they understand that we need desperately to protect American democracy, the American experiment, our rights to due process, our rights as enumerated in the Constitution of the United States of America. By covering some few and far between acts of violence. And don't get me wrong, I am not by any stretch of the imagination condoning such things. But we need to be clear that they have nothing to do with the vast majority of the people who are there exercising their First Amendment rights to free speech and to assemble and peacefully protest. By focusing on the sensational, we miss out on the essential. So both the right and left wing legacy media, if we can even pretend that there's a left wing of the legacy media, are dedicated at this point only to showing the most destructive elements in these protests. Legacy media networks continue to sensationalize isolated incidents of unrest while completely ignoring the actual story. I want you to take a look at this.
It was a far different scene over the weekend. Protesters setting up fireworks right there, police officers right nearby.
Whether it be in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, anywhere that these riots may break out.
In Seattle, flames near the federal building.
Some demonstrators set vehicles on fire and blocked major roadways.
Police car, it's set on fire.
Fireworks erupting into the crowd.
A line of self-driving vehicles set on fire,
while rocks are being thrown at an officer.
This is a vicious cycle. Nielsen data from April 2025 show that coverage of violent protest footage received 42% more airtime than coverage of protest demands or outcomes on major cable networks. In fact, what we're seeing in places like LA is that the overwhelming majority of protests are peaceful, focused, and full of community solidarity. Is that compelling? Shouldn't it be? Shouldn't that story be of the utmost importance to the American people? Because what happens when we do focus only on isolated acts of violence? Well, again, that just bolsters the right-wing narrative that the left is out of control, that the left is not playing by the rules and therefore deserves whatever acts of retribution and violence Donald Trump calls down on their heads. Secondly, it instills fear. It keeps people from being willing to participate in protests because they don't believe that they're peaceful. They believe that they're violent and that the violence is being solely instituted by other protesters. Finally, it's about optics. We have seen many protesters carrying American flags. More protesters need to be carrying American flags because what Donald and the Trump regime are trying to do is paint protesters as lawless, anti-American, un-American, and non-American, which makes violence against them and these extreme measures that Donald is taking by nationalizing federalizing the National Guard and calling an active military to quell protests seem reasonable because the protesters aren't really Americans anyway, he wants people to believe. So all the more reason for us to show up with more American flags, to show up absolutely dedicated to the idea that we are not going to be violent and we are not going to be provoked into violence and we are not going to give them what they want. Here is what legacy media is not showing us, but social media and independent media is. Watch this clip.
Declare this to be an unlawful assembly.
Unlawful assembly. Look at this unlawful assembly of people. Man.
Taking on a very festive atmosphere, as you can see here. Certainly a peaceful protest by all accounts.
Oh, the horrors. Yes, from Los Angeles to Sacramento, thousands of people are marching peacefully. They're chanting, they're handing out water, they're cleaning up parks. This is the heart of this movement. And by the way, some of them are helping local law enforcement recover from the tear gas that was sprayed at them by a federalized National Guard and the military that was deployed by Donald Trump. I mean, none of this is new. This is an old tactic. In fact, over 93% of all racial justice protests in the United States from 2020 to 2023 were nonviolent. And this is according to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. And that's as it should be. Why don't we know that? Well, because most of the time, protests are in service to promoting agendas that are at odds with the party in power. The Trump regime does not want people of color to have the same rights as white people in America. The Trump regime does not want people on the left to have the same rights as people on the right. The Trump regime does not want most of us to have the right to vote. They do not want women to have the right to bodily autonomy. Nobody needs to go out there and protest to protect the rights of white men. So I think it's pretty obvious on its face what has been and continues to be going on here. The next time you see news footage of a burning car or a broken shop window, ask yourself this question: what aren't they showing you? And then remember why people are protesting in the first place. Millions of people are taking this to the streets of America to push back against the encroaching fascism of the Trump regime. They are out there to protect the rights of immigrants, undocumented workers, and all American citizens. That is what we cannot side of, even if that's what they want us to do. Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.